Now, as to what it is that this is actually doing. Here is an example. I have this one object here that's called play only. Basically, I have 8 different buffers in my, I'll show you this here right now. So there's this set of objects that's called ambisonics that's developed by ICST, and they built basically this way of being able to move sound around an octophonic space. And so right now I have it set up so that if I have, let me put this over here in the corner. Right now I've got a few objects that deal with this. One is called play only, where basically I say if my hand enters the field, it's going to play a sound, and nothing else happens. That's the only thing that happens. If I take this and move it into a different buffer, I have these 8 different buffers here. I can say, okay, I want to play what's stored in the second buffer, and then when my hand enters the field, then that second buffer operates. And in this space here, you probably can't tell through the glass audio, but basically, in this monitor, this is where the first point of that sound is, and this is where the second point sound is. And I can take that and move that anywhere around the surround sound space that I want, mouse clicking, so it will appear anywhere in that octophonic space. So if you remember, one of the objects that I had created for my initial leap testing was one called grain stretch, using grain stretch, where it mapped my y coordinates to the actual speed and placement of the actual sample. I'm not doing that this time around with the actual grain stretch thing. What I'm doing instead is this. I have this object that's called hiccup. And if I activate it, then when my hand enters the field with the fist closed, I caught it a little bit too late. I'm going to try that again once the sound finishes. When my hand enters the leap field with my fist closed, then it activates it and triggers it. When my fist opens, it basically stops the sound and stops the sound in one particular spot. And then when I close my fist again, or open it or close it, then it will do that same thing. I also have it set for a couple of different ways. There's this thing here, hiccup, and any value between 0 and 1 basically is what the modified speed is, 1 being full speed and 0 being a full stop. So if instead I make this 0.1, come at it with a fist, and then put my fist out, or open up my fingers, now it's going to go through the sound at 0.1 speed until I close my fist again. So that was the first thing that I've done with the sound. Eventually, that's going to move along a fixed trajectory around this octophonic space. And that hasn't been built yet because I haven't built those trajectories. So playing off of that then, I have this next object here that's called pause and place. And pause and place does a couple of things. One of them is basically, because I haven't set up the trajectories yet, and because I haven't built in some pre-recorded sounds that are going to be based off of this grain stretch, this is going to be sound a little bit weird, but I'm going to turn on looping. So this is going to loop a sound when I enter the field with my fist closed. So there's a sound in question. And you could see there that there is the number 1 ended up moving around to a different spot. That's because pause and place is basically programmed. I'm going to program it to go down a fixed trajectory until the number of milliseconds that I specified, I'm going to switch fists here, the number of milliseconds I have specified in this function, after 4 seconds or 4,000 milliseconds, basically the trajectory file is going to be, the trajectory is going to get interrupted, and it's going to find where it is that my hand actually is. Because in the piece of music, basically, I'm going to be doing visual movement with my hand to move the space around, and I'm going to mimic what it is that that trajectory is that I have recorded, but at some point, I want it to be able to actually track where it is that my hand is and have the sound placed where it is that my sound is. And that's what that does. It starts with a trajectory, and then at some point, when I stop my fist or stop my hand, then it's going to find that in that space. So this is what it is that it's done now, basically. It's taken where it is that I put my fist and moved it into this particular spot of the octophonic space, okay? And then what I can do after that is when I open up 3 fingers, then now I have the ability to move that sound wherever I want within that octophonic space. It's going to move around the room, and I'm going to have it sweep around the room in that sort of way, potentially. But really what it's going to be is, at some point, I'm going to fix that sound into a particular spot. And once I fix that sound into a particular spot, when I close my fist, then it moves on to the next phase of sound, which actually not I called, but ICST calls swarm. And right now, the swarm sound is in a pre-recorded sound. It's going to end up being the sound of the stopped sound. I just haven't had the opportunity to build that in because I've just built that swarm object. Here's what the swarm object is. I've basically built 8 of these also. So I have the potential to be able to have 8 different swarm sounds happening at the same time. Let me start this over so that you can see what it is that's actually happening with that swarm sound. So this is what it is that the swarming thing does. I have this pause and place thing. I turn that on. I put my fist over the space and I start the sound. I open up my fist and it finds my fist initially. I close the 3 fingers and now I can move the sound around the space however I can want to move the sound. Okay? Then, as soon as I close my fist, if you watch the swarm that's happening over here on the right-hand side, this right here, as soon as I close my fist, basically the sound is then going to slowly turn into 10 grains that will randomly move anywhere around this box that's slowly expanding. In that octophonic space. And right now the sound is basically the pre-built sound that's in that swarm, but eventually it's going to be where the sound is stopped in that paused area of the drive-by sound. What it is I did with the initial hiccup. And if I wanted to, this particular patch gives me the ability to move this around manually if I want around the surround sound space. But all this stuff is basically going to be automated and controlled by me putting my fist over here. And then when I open it up to 3 fingers, then I have the ability to move that around, which you can see that I'm moving around right now because the swarm is still on. Then once I put it into a space, I close my fist, and it gradually opens up that from a single point into a spread point within the surround space. And eventually, I think I might take that and expand that to an even greater range. Once I have 5 or 6 of these swarms going, then I might have all those swarms eventually intersect with each other and overlap each other and take the whole surround sound space, just to kind of see what that sounds like and then how that maps over top of that. If I make any other significant progress, then I'll make another video. I may also make another video that goes into more details about a few of these particular patches, but I don't want to do that until the patch is actually complete. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.